You're listening to Talkline with Zev Brenner, America's premier Jewish broadcast on the air since 1981.
And now, here's your host.
Welcome back to the program. I'm Zev Brenner. Always a treat, always a privilege to have Harvard Law Professor Emeritus Professor Alan Dershowitz. So good to see you again, and good to see you again on Shabbos at the Park East Synagogue.
Yeah, it was very nice. The chazan was terrific. Your wife was fantastic. She made it's just wonderful Dvar Torah, and it made me confirm my own belief that we need women in every phase of Jewish life.
I agree with you. So thank you. So you mentioned women in every phase of Jewish life, and there's a whole big thing now with women and what's going on. I want to reflect that the new person in charge in Washington, D.C. to be the press secretary is somebody by name of Karine Jean-Pierre, who is anti-AIPAC. She says AIPAC is racist and she's against Israel. What's going on? We're seeing anti-Semitism growing, and you've written books and you're always out there, and I compliment you for it. You're being a staunch defender of the Jewish people, but it seems like we're fighting a battle on every front. I'll start first in Washington with the new press secretary.
What we're seeing is the normalization of anti-Semitism as anti-Zionism. Anti-Zionism is just the old anti-Semitism in new bottles, and people are falling for it. If this woman had expressed things about Jews, as she said, about Zionism or about Israel, nobody would seriously consider her for the job. But because her bigoted actions have been limited to anti-Zionism, she's acceptable. She's not acceptable. The spokesperson for the President of the United States should not have views of the kind that she has expressed. It's a serious mistake, and it's what's causing many of us lifelong Democrats to reconsider our allegiance to the Democratic Party. You know, I wrote a book in which the subtitle was Why I Left the Left But Couldn't Join the Right. You know, I support a woman's right to have an abortion. I support gay marriage. I support reasonable gun control. I support separation of church and state. I support many of the things on the classic liberal agenda, but I can't support the Squad. I can't support Elizabeth Warren. I can't support Bernie Sanders. And I can't support this woman who's now the spokesperson for the President of the United States. So, you know, I feel politically homeless. I feel at home on your station, but I don't feel politically that I have a home either in the newly emerging Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Look, President Biden today in a speech said to the Republican young people, this is not your father's Republican Party. And he's right, but he should have said, and this is not your father's Democratic Party. This is not the Democratic Party my parents voted for, my grandparents voted for. I voted for 50 or more years. This is changing. And we're seeing a radicalization of America. We're seeing the Harvard Crimson, which in 1935 endorsed giving an honorary degree to the spokesperson for Hitler's Nazi party, has now endorsed Hamas, essentially, the end of Israel. And we're not hearing very much. Yeah, we have 70 Harvard professors protesting out of what, 1,000? And I know a lot of Harvard professors who in their heart, deep in their heart, are upset at what the Crimson did, but they don't have the guts, the courage, the chutzpah to stand up. You know, the Talmud talks about chutzpah k'la'apei shemaya when it talks about Abraham arguing with Hashem over the sinners of Saddam. And what we need is chutzpah k'la'apei shemaya. We need to stand up for our rights. Another thing that I picked up in shul, I love to go to shul, because I pick up so many issues. So on the Friday night service, which I went to, I remember there was one blessing where we thank God for giving us Da'at and Bina. And then we also say, Hashem ozli amo yitain, Hashem yivarech et amo b'shalom, but we never combine the two. For 2,000 years, we had Da'at and Bina. We produced Einstein, we produced Kafka, we produced Mahler, we produced some of the greatest brains in the world. We used our Da'at and
Alan Dershowitz.
No, but we didn't.
We can include you in that.
No, but we didn't use it to produce O's. It took the Israeli government, it took the creation of Israel for the first time in modern Jewish history to turn Da'at and Bina into O's. And that is the key to Jewish survival. We can't just use Da'at and Bina to study, as important as that is, to develop theories, very important. We have to do it for cyber technology, and we have to do it to strengthen Israel and to strengthen the Jewish people. And we have to never forget what it says in the prayer. We're not going to get peace, shalom, unless we first get strength. And that's what we need to get.
You sound like a speech that Meir Kahane gave a while back.
Well, Meir Kahane asked a lot of the right questions. He gave a lot of the wrong answers. As you know, I defended Meir Kahane. I've known Meir Kahane since we both went to Brooklyn Talmudical Academy. We were both on the debating team at Brooklyn Talmudical Academy. The problem for me with Meir Kahane is that he did believe in killing innocent civilians, and he did believe that the ends justify the means. Now, you know, sometimes they do. If we were living in Nazi Germany, yeah, the ends would justify the means. But I fundamentally disagreed with his policy of violent actions. But his questions were good ones. You know, we debated 3 times.
Including on my show, by the way.
We debated on your show. We debated at Rabbi Weiss's synagogue, and we debated once in Boston. It was a great honor and a privilege for me to debate him. I was the only, quote, established Jewish leader who was willing to debate him. Everybody else said, no, he's beyond the pale. And I never agreed with that. I thought he was worth debating and his questions were worth addressing.
I think we've gotten worse, though. We don't want to, people we don't agree with, we don't want to communicate with. It's been bad, but I think it's worse now. And I want you to comment on the Jewish Museum of Jewish Heritage, which they disinvited Ron DeSantis. Actually, they told Turco they can't come.
Before we get to that, let's talk about the Ramaz School in New York, the elite high school for Orthodox Jewish students. They have canceled me. They have disinvited me. They first asked me without any charge, without any fee, to talk to their students in the 11th and 12th grade about what they're going to confront in college was anti-Zionism. And I have to tell you with all modesty, there is no person on the face of the planet Earth who's more qualified to talk about college anti-Semitism than I am. I have spoken in more colleges and universities, and the headmaster of the Ramah school called me and canceled me and said, sorry, a bunch of big machas in the school on the board don't want you speaking. Temple Emmanuel canceled me. The 92nd Street Y canceled me. You know, as Pogo said many years ago, the cartoon character, we have seen our enemy and he is us. And if any of you are active in the Ramah school, call them and ask them, why are you canceling Alan Dershowitz? Why are you not allowing him to prepare our students for a college? Why does Temple Emmanuel invite and pay $25,000 to Peter Beinart, who calls for the destruction of the state of Israel, but refuses to have me debate issues relating to Israel, to the pandemic, to the Bible? Why does the 92nd Street Y, which has all sorts of anti-Israel people speaking, why have they refused to allow me to speak? That's the question. Unless we speak to the Jewish leaders, the fault is the machas, the Jewish leaders, the people who have it too good. They don't want to shake the boat. And they are disserving American Jews just the way Jewish leaders disserved American Jews in the 1930s and the 1940s, because they didn't want to rock the boat. Felix Frankfurter did not want to upset Franklin Delano Roosevelt by telling him that Jews were being murdered in death camps. We can't have a repeat of that, and we're having a repeat of it right now.
In the Ramah situation, did you reach out to Rabbi Haskell Luxin? I know you have a long-term relationship with him.
I did not. He doesn't have a direct involvement in the Ramah school. It was the headmaster of the Ramah school. If Rabbi Luxin is listening, have him call me. I'm happy to talk to him. I do have a long-term relationship with him, but I didn't want to bother him with something that's beyond his ken. It's the school, the high school, that made this decision. And it's an outrageous decision, a McCarthyite decision, and a decision that hurts the Jewish community and hurts the students.
Now, I want to focus, and I agree with you. And I know maybe you were going to have a synagogue in Manhattan where you're going to put them on trial, Temple Emmanuel, Ramaz, 92nd Street Y.
If somebody invites me, I'm happy to do it. But the Jewish leaders don't want to shake the boat. They don't want to rock the boat. They have it too good. Their kids are getting into Harvard. Their kids are getting into Yale. Yeah, they're turning into anti-Zionists, but they're getting into Harvard and Yale, and that's good enough for most Jewish parents.
Well, maybe the stress is too much on that, and there's not enough stress of Jewish kids going to Jewish education and Jewish leadership.
Well, but what kind of Jewish education are they getting if they're getting woke education even in some of the Jewish schools? And look at some of the non-Jewish high schools now. Dalton just was with people the other day who took their kids out of Dalton. They went to Dalton themselves. but they've taken their kids out because of the anti-Semitism and the wokeness and the intersectionality, and whites are all racists. And I don't have to go through the whole agenda, but this wokeness is at its core anti-Semitic.
Before I get to the Jewish Museum of Jewish Heritage, you mentioned education. In New York State, there's a movement on hand of the officials to regulate yeshivot and as far as what they teach, as far as secular studies are concerned. I'm curious to get your position about that. Should the state be telling yeshivas what they should or shouldn't be teaching?
I think up to a certain grade, students have to learn mathematics, they have to learn science, they have to learn English, and I think the state does have not only a right but an obligation to make sure that every American child.
They say you have to have 2 hours a day, 3 hours a day. Can they say that to schools?
That may be too much, but the same thing is true of students from other religions. And yes, parents have the right to give their children religious education, but even homeschooling is regulated. If you homeschool your kids, you have to give them a certain amount of application to math and science. So I think if we have a reasonable approach to this, we can compromise. It's not the approach that says we're not going to teach our children anything. By the way, the kids who go to these yeshivot do quite well on competitive exams. So the empirical data doesn't really support what the state is necessarily doing. But in principle, the state does have the power to tell parents that they must expose their children to a certain amount of secular education. But by the way,
how much is it, can they tell you to do?
Then it's a different issue.
I'm sorry, what is a different issue?
If the secular education, whether in public schools or elsewhere, becomes woke and biased and anti-white and anti-Jewish, that's different. The state has no right to.
But that's where the concern is. The concern is a slippery slope. Once you open the door where they come and say you got to get 2 hours, in 6 months from now, they can say you got to teach critical race theory, you got to teach gender identity, etc. That's where there's a concern, and it's legitimate concern, I think.
Legitimate concern. But right now, all they're doing is telling the Jewish schools that they can have their Jewish teachers, their rabbis, teach math in a way that doesn't have critical legal whatever studies, critical racial studies. But you have to worry about that. If you give the state the power to do one thing, it could morph into the power to do something a lot more dangerous. Let's keep our eye on it.
We're speaking
about the Jewish Museum. I know DeSantis. I had dinner with him when he was first elected governor. He's a decent man. I disagree with him politically. It's outrageous that the Jewish Heritage Museum would deny him the right to speak while giving the right to horrible people, anti-Israel people, the right to speak.
Like AOC.
Shooting themselves in the foot. And I like the museum. I like the restaurant in the museum. I go to plays there. I've gone to the museum repeatedly. I'm not going to go to that museum if they're refusing to allow DeSantis or other people who support Israel to partake of their platform. That's just wrong.
We're speaking with Harvard Law Professor Emeritus, the one and only Professor Alan Dershowitz. We're looking at some important issues affecting the Jewish community. There's a wokeness that's affecting the Jewish community, Professor Dershowitz, and you mentioned some schools on the 92nd Street. Why? But even the ADL, which monitors anti-Semitism, they do a good job, and anti-Semitism is unfortunately on the rise. But in their report, they talk about anti-Semitism in New York and Brooklyn being the capital, and they blame white nationalists as opposed to what it really is. I hate to say it, but the truth is in Brooklyn, it's mostly blacks that are attacking Jews. But yet, in order to be politically correct, they keep talking about white nationalists. What's going on?
Absolutely right. We have to talk about all sides of the anti-Semitic spectrum, racial sides, religious sides. Remember when we were growing up, I'm older than you are, but when we were growing up, there was an enormous amount of Catholic anti-Semitism that has thankfully dissipated with the 1964, various changes in the views of the Catholic Church. And now the Catholic Church is generally quite supportive. Many Catholic Americans are among Israel's strongest supporters. But we grew up at a time when anti-Semitism came from the religious right, from Father Coughlin, from other things. But it's changed. It's now coming from the hard left. And some of the worst anti-Semites in the world are Jews. Norman Finkelstein, Gilad Atzmon, the anti-Zionists on the hard left, including organizations, Jewish organizations, the Jewish Voice for Peace, which isn't Jewish. Fortunately, it doesn't have much of a voice, and it doesn't favor peace. But the Jewish Voice for Peace is one of the most anti-Semitic groups in the world today. And we have to look inwardly, too. Just because you have the name Jewish or your name is Peter Beinart doesn't mean you're not an anti-Semite. Peter Beinart wants to see the end of the nation state of the Jewish people in Israel. That's anti-Semitism. As Larry Summers once said, maybe not in intent, but in effect. Summers, by the way, said that the Crimson editorial is anti-Semitic, both in intent and in effect, which is why I'm fighting it so strongly.
What can we do to fight this whole new surge of anti-Semitism, including the Crimson, where they supported BDS and Palestinians and attacked Israel and basically attacking Jews, and was getting it from all corners, from the press secretary in the White House, Brooklyn. I know you and I spoke off there about New Jersey, a whole pattern of anti-Semitism. It surrounds us all. What can we do?
Get rid of the current Jewish leaders. The current Jewish leaders are cowards. Anti-Semitism is largely a function of cowardice today. People's unwillingness to speak out because they have it too good. They are too much a part of the establishment. They're making money. They're sending their kids to excellent schools. They're living in great neighborhoods. They're doing phenomenally well. So why rock the boat? And it's the Jewish leaders. You think the members of the congregations of Temple Emmanuel wanted to cancel me? Of course not. They came, 1,600 people would come hear me speak. It's 4 or 5 machas from the organization. The chairman of the board, who himself was an ad agent for Big Pharma and other horrible groups, he was the one who engineered it. The former head of CNN is on the board of the 92nd Street Y, the man who himself was dismissed because he had an affair with a subordinate. These are the people who run the 92nd Street Y, the Temple Emmanuel, the Ramaz School, and we've got to get rid of them. We got to get rid of that leadership. We have to have a more courageous leadership. We have to remember chutzpah k'lapei shemaya. We have to remember that it takes a willingness to speak out at a time of great danger, and we live at a time of great danger. And we lack the Jewish leaders today to stand up to that. We lost Elie Wiesel. He was a great voice, willingness to speak truth to power. Today, the Jewish leaders are not willing to speak truth to power. They only want to increase their own power. The people, and look, the rabbi of Temple Emmanuel, he's a nice guy. He's a decent guy. He doesn't want to cancel me, but he's afraid he's going to get fired if he takes on the rich members of the board, the machas, the ones who are making the fortune of money. They're the ones who are creating this problem. It's exactly the same thing that happened in 1942 and 43, when the established Jews wouldn't listen to Peter Berkowitz, wouldn't listen to the voices that were speaking out, wouldn't listen to even non-Jewish voices because they had it too good. They had their man as president. Franklin Delano Roosevelt, they thought was good for the Jews, and he was good for the American Jews. He just wasn't good for European Jews.
Well, it sounds like we need to do a lot more than just change leadership. Let me look at, for example, Lufthansa Airlines. A group of Orthodox Jews was supposed to go from Germany to Hungary, and because some of the group didn't wear masks, they said, all you Jews are not really going to be able to fly. They apologized without using the word Jews. Should we be boycotting? Because I remember I was on Channel 13. I went to meet with Donald Sussman, the vice president, years ago. He had a meeting of Jewish media and Jewish leaders, and he said, you guys are too nice because, other groups, when we write something or show something against a group, there's demonstrations. We say we never give, and we do. You guys are too nice.
Yeah,
So absolutely too nice.
We are too nice, but the answer isn't boycotts. The answer is suing. I try to start a new campaign. I actually held a press conference and nobody picked it up. My slogan was, hit a Jew, we sue you. And the very notion is, if you attack a Jew in Brooklyn, I don't care what your race is, I don't care if you're a white nationalist, a black nationalist, or anybody else, you hit a Jew, and I'm going to represent the victim pro bono and bankrupt you and make sure you never, ever earn another nickel in your life, because we're going to get a judgment against you for $250,000. And you're going to have to spend the rest of your life paying off that judgment. And that's the way to stop Jews getting hit. We're not going to count on people getting arrested because the police don't arrest them. But when you bring a lawsuit, if you get 10 good lawyers together, with few investigators, former policemen, former assistant DAs, and you track down everybody who's ever hit a Jew, who's ever attacked a Jew. You don't need the government for that. You bring your own lawsuit. It's a civil suit. You win the lawsuit in front of a jury, and you get a judgment for $250,000, and the person has to spend the rest of his life paying that off. That message is going to be sent around Brooklyn, around Queens, again around Manhattan, and people are going to think twice before they hit a Jew.
So do we have lawyers aside from yourself that are committed, that are willing to do that, what you're recommending?
You want to hear the first lawyer who agreed to do this?
Who?
Arthur Aidala, a non-Jewish Italian-American, said, what a great idea, Alan. I'm in with you. I'm going to join you. We'll sue. We need some Jewish lawyers, too. We need lawyers of every faith to come and say, you hit a Jew, we sue you. You know, we're pretty good.
Every Jew who said we sue you. It sounds like a good slogan.
We're pretty good at suing. You know, we're maybe better at suing than boycotting, because all you need is one person to sue. To have a boycott, you need a lot of people. It's much easier for a large group in the population to bring a boycott than it is for a relatively small number of Jews boycotting a German airline. How many Jews fly on the German airline? Maybe we should do that too. But I think using the legal system to satisfy our demand for justice and deterrence is effective as well.
So you're saying we should be suing Lufthansa?
Yeah. Anytime a Jew is discriminated against, there should be a lawsuit. And we should be setting up a Jewish organization. I'd be happy to be an honorary co-chairman of the organization. I'm a little too old to be in court every day. I'm, almost 84 now. But my pro bono support to that Jewish organization, if you mess with Jews, you get sued and we win and we bankrupt you. And that's our answer to anti-Jewish bigotry. Now, you can't sue the Crimson, obviously. But if anybody discriminates against a Jew, and by the way, BDS is discrimination. It's discrimination based on national origin. It's discrimination based on religion, based on ethnicity. So we can win BDS lawsuits. We can't win lawsuits against newspapers, but we pick our targets carefully.
Our guest is Harvard Law Professor Emeritus, Professor Alan Dershowitz, looking at some very important issues of the day.
By the way, if you want more of this, tune into my podcast. I have a podcast on every day at 5:30. It's on Rumble and on YouTube. 3 days a week it's live, and the rest of the time you can get it on the websites. Just Google The Dersh Show, and you'll be able to get it. And you'll agree with some of the things I say and disagree with other of the things. But that's what debate is supposed to be like in America, not
people to tune into it, and hopefully we'll carry that very soon in our VIP station. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about Roe v. Wade. There's a whole controversy with the fact that it was leaked, what it means. It gives the Democrats a chance to get back. I think it helps them out politically. But your opinions about what the leaking of Supreme Court justices' deliberations?
Oh, it's terrible. When I was a law clerk on the Supreme Court, we were deciding some of the most important civil rights cases of the century. During the year I was clerking with Justice Goldberg, no law clerk would ever dream. We wouldn't tell our wives, our brothers, our children. It was the most sacrosanct thing. It was like a confession to a priest or a rabbi or a lawyer. You just don't go around leaking Supreme Court decisions. Now, this was somebody who did it purposely to achieve a goal. We're not sure what the goal was, but to change the status quo somehow. And I think Roe versus Wade will be overruled. I don't think it should be overruled. This case does not present the issue of should Roe versus Wade be overruled. It only presents the issue of whether to restrict abortion to 15 weeks. That's all the court should be deciding, not whether or not you can never have an abortion. But this is an activist court, which is reaching out to decide an issue which is not necessarily before it. So I hope it doesn't overrule Roe versus Wade, but it probably will.
But what does that mean exactly? Because states such as New York, New Jersey will still go ahead with business as usual. Only certain states that will ban abortion completely, but not places like New York.
That's right. Now, there is a movement, but it will fail. A movement afoot to say that no state should have the power to allow abortions because abortions are murder, abortions are killing babies, and the right to life in the Constitution. I don't think the court would ever go that far. And Justice Alito, who I know is a really, really nice man, has said in this draft opinion that it only involves abortion. It doesn't involve gay marriage. It doesn't involve interracial marriage. It doesn't involve conception, birth control. It doesn't involve other things. But, we have to wait and see. People will try.
It's being distorted because they're just like what they call the gay law, don't tell gay in Florida. It's being distorted. I can understand where people are coming from on all sides of the issues, but it's not banning it across the United States. Here in New York, your elected officials saying it's going to affect every woman in the country. They're just purposely distorting that. We're in an age of misinformation and distortion, which I find frightening.
Everything is being distorted. Even this new Bureau of Disinformation that has been
Love the name.
It's called Disinformation Governance Board. Even that is being subject to disinformation. It is not a big brother group that's going to sit and decide what people can say. When I was growing up, we had jokes. We called it the Department of Redundancy Department. Now we have the Disinformation Governance Board. But there is so much disinformation out there, but that's for the people to decide. Let the people make up their own minds. The only area the government should be involved in disinformation is medical issues that are dangerous to life. The government has the right to tell you not to use certain drugs, pharmaceuticals. The government has the right to tell you that smoking cigarettes causes cancer. Those kinds of things the government has an appropriate role to play in. But to tell you who to vote for, to tell you what's true politically, to tell you what's right about Israel, no, the government shouldn't be playing any role.
So how do we get back on track? Because we're so off track. Is there any hope that things are going to change?
Well, there are two ways that things can change. One, they get too far in one direction and the pendulum swings. I don't think I'll live long enough to see that. I want to see change now. And I think what we need is to organize around this. We have to organize in the Jewish community to replace our cowardly leaders with a little bit of courage and guts, and people who are prepared to put their own careers on the line. And we ought to stop putting rich people in charge of the Jewish community because they have too much to lose. Today, the Jewish leadership tend to be very wealthy people. Some of them are fantastic. You get a guy like, there are so many, I don't want to get into them, but there are so many Jewish leaders who are extremely wealthy who stand up for the Jewish community, but not everybody. And we have to make sure that the Jewish leadership always puts the interests of the Jewish people first, the Klal Yisrael, the average Jewish person, not just the person who wants to get his kid into Harvard.
Are you ready to take on the role of leadership of a Jewish organization?
Oh, no, I'm too old for that. But
Moses started at 80.
I know. I'm 84. I got him beat by 4 years almost.
Well, Aaron, his brother was 83.
An advisory role, a consulting role, an honorary role. I'm prepared to take on a major role, but not a day-to-day leadership role. I was offered the opportunity to do that several times in my career and never thought of myself as an organization person. But now I think it's very important for these Jewish organizations to turn over and to become much more aggressive and to use not only their dot and bina, but their oz, their strength. And that's what I want to see happen in the next years.
You've been consistent, and we have a few moments left. But a lot of people have shunned you because of the fact that you represent Donald Trump, and they feel you've abandoned, the left or the Democrats. Are things moving? Are people starting to come back, or are you still seeing the polarization in your friendships, including in Martha's Vineyard?
Well, I don't care about Martha's Vineyard. I do care about the 92nd Street Y and Temple Emmanuel and the Ramah School. And I've just written a book about that called The Price of Principle, in which I tell the stories of the 92nd Street Y and Temple Emmanuel and the Ramah School. And I name names and I point fingers. And I tell what happens in America today if you put principle before partisanship. And it's a real problem. So the book will be out in about a month. It's called The Price of Principle. And you can watch my, or listen and watch my podcast and listen to me on Zev Brenner show. I love coming on here, and I love that you call me Avi. I was called Avi for the first 20 years of my life until my mother said, you're going to law school, you need a real name. So I became Alan.
Well, Ira Kelman, you say he's Avi. He doesn't want to call you Alan, he calls you Avi. So one of your biggest fans.
It was, when I was Avi, we were in high school together. And, he's a great guy.
That's great. Any reunions planning for your BTA class? So
see a BTA reunion. I'd love to see a Camp Maple Lake reunion. I went to Camp Maple Lake for like 6 years, and reunions are fun and they're nostalgic. And at my age, nostalgia is a good thing.
But they say nostalgia is not as good as it used to be. And Professor Alan Dershowitz, thank you for joining. Thank you for all that you do. And really, we have to push ourselves to do more because we're losing political power and losing to anti-Semitism.
Right. And thank you for all you do. I think your broadcasts really empower people and encourage people to do the right things. So keep it up.
Thank you.
And tell your
I'm sorry?
What a wonderful speaker she is, and what a wonderful rabbinite she is. And she is really on the forefront of, I think, a whole new movement.
Thank you. Adina that works very hard, and she's looking to be within the Orthodox realm and get the message out. And
he's doing it. Great.
Thank you.
Be well.
Listening.
For continuous Jewish program, Talkline-Network.com, or our 24-hour-a-day listen line at 641-741-0389. For past shows, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, Amazon, YouTube, Instagram, and all major podcast platforms, or jewishpodcast.org. Thanks for listening to the Talkline-Network.com.